the CEO's daughter who collapsed at the cafe, and the waitress who did the unthinkable. Every Thursday at exactly 4 o'clock, Daniel Hayes and his 8-year-old daughter Lily stepped into Harborview Café, their little corner of peace amid Daniel's storm of deadlines and board meetings. To Lily, the cafe wasn't just a stop for hot chocolate. It was a ritual. Their time together away from glowing screens and business calls. That afternoon, the autumn sun poured through the wide window overlooking the river. Lily's curls bounced as she hurried to their usual corner table, chattering about her day. "Dad," Emma brought her hamster to class and it escaped under the teacher's desk. "We had to crawl all over the floor to catch it." Daniel smiled absently as he stood at the counter, his phone vibrating in his hand with another urgent email. Without even glancing up, he ordered their usual: a black coffee for himself and a sugar-free hot chocolate with extra whipped cream for Lily. He said it out of habit, the same way one might breathe. The waitress on duty, a quiet woman with observant eyes, nodded. Her name tag read Claire Evans. Daniel had seen her around but never really spoken to her. She wasn't like most servers. There was a calm sharpness about her, a stillness that suggested she'd seen more than she let on. When Claire brought their drinks, she set Lily's cup carefully in front of her, smiling warmly. "Extra cream, just how you like it," she said. Lily grinned. "Thank you. Want to see what I'm drawing?" Claire hesitated, glancing toward Daniel as if asking permission. He nodded distractedly, typing something into his phone. When Claire leaned down, her smile softened, then faltered. Lily's cheeks looked a little too pale, a faint sweat along her hairline. Her hands trembled slightly as she colored. Claire's gaze caught on a small medical device on the girl's wrist, a continuous glucose monitor, softly beeping. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "She's fine, just running a little low," he said, reaching over to adjust the insulin pump clipped to Lily's belt. He sounded casual, like it was just another part of the day. But Claire didn't move away. Something deep in her instincts stirred. Instincts she thought she'd buried 2 years ago when she turned in her paramedic badge and traded emergency calls for coffee cups. Lily proudly lifted her drawing. 3 stick figures under a bright yellow sun, 2 holding hands with a smaller one between them, and a 4th figure above them with wings. "That's me and Daddy," she said. "And that's Mommy. She's an angel now." Claire felt her throat tighten. Daniel's jaw clenched and he looked away quickly. The silence between them carried a grief so old it had learned to stay quiet. Then Daniel's phone rang again, and he sighed. "It's the Hong Kong office. I need to take this. Could you just keep an eye on her for a minute?" "Of course," Claire said. He squeezed Lily's shoulder and stepped outside, pacing on the sidewalk with his phone to his ear. Claire sat across from Lily, watching her hum softly as she colored. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. Lily's crayon slipped from her hand and rolled across the table. Her eyes went distant. "Miss Claire," she whispered weakly, "I don't feel good." In an instant, the old paramedic inside Claire woke up. The quiet beep from Lily's glucose monitor turned into a shrill alarm. Claire's pulse raced. She knew that sound and what it meant. Lily's body tilted forward, and before she could fall, Claire caught her, lowering her gently to the floor. Around them, people gasped. A few reached for their phones, recording, not helping, but Claire wasn't seeing them. Her focus narrowed to the little girl's pale face and faint pulse under trembling fingers. The monitor flashed 40 mg/dl. Her stomach dropped. "Dangerously low, Lily, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Claire said, voice steady though her hands shook. Outside, Daniel turned toward the window just in time to see his daughter collapse. His coffee cup hit the ground as he sprinted inside. As Daniel fell to his knees beside his unconscious daughter, Claire realized she was the only one in the room who could save her, and doing so might force her to face the very past she'd spent 2 years trying to forget. Daniel's face went pale as he dropped beside his daughter, his voice trembling. "Lily, Lily, sweetheart, open your eyes." His hands fumbled through her small medical pouch, trying to find the emergency glucagon injection. But his fingers shook so badly that he couldn't even pull the cap off. Claire's instincts took over. "Sir," she said, steady and firm, placing a hand on his wrist. "I'm a trained paramedic. I know what to do, but I need you to trust me." He looked at her in disbelief. "You're a waitress, Not always, she said quietly, locking eyes with him. Please, trust me. Something in her tone cut through the chaos. Daniel nodded, still clutching Lily's hand. Claire glanced around the cafe. Someone call 911 now, she shouted, her voice slicing through the panic. And I need honey, fast. A barista rushed over with a handful of honey packets. Claire tore one open with her teeth, kneeling beside Lily. She knew the risk. Giving sugar to someone barely conscious could cause choking, but she also knew waiting might kill her. The injection Daniel held would take too long, and the ambulance wouldn't make it in time. Sir, hold her head steady just like this, Claire instructed, guiding his trembling hands. Then she used her finger to gently spread a small amount of honey along the inside of Lily's cheek, letting it absorb slowly. Come on, sweetheart. You're okay. Stay with me. The cafe fell into complete silence. Only the shrill sound of the glucose monitor and the faint hum of traffic outside broke the tension. Claire's voice was calm, rhythmic. You're safe, Lily. Your dad's here. I'm right here. Seconds stretched like hours. Daniel's jaw tightened, tears burning behind his eyes. He could only watch as this woman, this stranger, worked with precision and tenderness, refusing to give up. Then Lily's eyelids fluttered. A faint sound escaped her lips. Daddy? Daniel's breath hitched, half a sob, half a laugh. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. Claire checked the monitor, 52 mg/dl, then 56. The numbers were climbing. Relief flooded through her body so hard her knees almost gave out. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, flashing lights reflecting off the cafe windows. The paramedics rushed in moments later, 2 of them, efficient and focused. Claire stepped back to make room, though her hands were trembling. Her professional instincts returned as she rattled off information automatically. 8-year-old female, type 1 diabetic, glucose dropped to 40. Administered sublingual glucose with honey at 4:07. Regained consciousness at 4:12. Current reading, 60 and rising. One of the paramedics looked up at her sharply. Evans? He said, squinting. Claire Evans? I thought you left the service. Claire's breath caught. Yeah, she said softly. I did. They nodded respectfully, moving to stabilize Lily for transport. Daniel climbed into the ambulance with his daughter, his face streaked with tears but his grip steady. As the doors were about to close, he turned toward Claire. Through the chaos and flashing lights, their eyes met. Please, he said hoarsely, make sure she's okay. I'll come back. I promise. Then the door slammed shut and the ambulance sped off, its siren echoing down the street. Claire stood frozen, the sound drilling into her chest. For the first time in years, she could feel the adrenaline fade, and with it came the shaking. She took a few steps toward the back of the cafe, her vision narrowing. The crowd was still buzzing, phones still recording, but it all blurred together. In her mind, she wasn't in Harborview Cafe anymore. She was back on a wet highway 2 years ago. Metal twisted, smoke rising, a mother screaming. A small shoe on the road, her hands covered in blood. She heard the same sirens, the same cries. She had failed that time. She had frozen, and a child had died. The manager found her minutes later, sitting on the office floor, her head buried in her knees, gasping for air. Claire, you did it, the woman said softly. You saved that girl's life. You're a hero, but Claire shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Heroes don't freeze, she whispered. Heroes don't let kids die. As the ambulance disappeared down the street, Claire realized she had just done the one thing she'd sworn she'd never do again, step back into the world that had broken her. And now that door she'd kept shut for 2 years had just swung wide open. At the hospital, the sterile white walls hummed quietly with machines. Lily lay in a narrow bed surrounded by soft beeps and the faint hiss of oxygen. A tiny IV line ran into her arm, and though her skin was pale, her chest rose and fell evenly. She was safe. Daniel Hayes sat beside her, his suit wrinkled, his phone forgotten on the floor. For the first time in years, work didn't matter. All that mattered was the fragile rise and fall of his daughter's breathing. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Hayes, she said gently, your daughter's stable now. We'll keep her overnight for observation, but she's going to be fine. Daniel exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand over his face. Thank God. He hesitated, then asked, how close was it? The doctor gave a small, knowing look. Minutes. maybe less. Whoever helped her before the ambulance arrived knew exactly what they were doing. That honey technique isn't something we typically see outside of advanced emergency training. Daniel blinked. The waitress, Claire. She said she used to be a paramedic. Well, the doctor said with quiet admiration, your daughter's lucky she was there. That woman saved her life. Daniel nodded slowly, but his chest felt heavy. The words she saved her life didn't even seem big enough for what had happened. He looked down at Lily, her little hand resting on the blanket. You hear that, Peanut? He murmured softly. You're here because of her. When visiting hours ended, Daniel couldn't rest. The hospital felt too still, too full of what-ifs. So as soon as morning light hit the horizon, he drove straight back to Harborview Café. The café was quieter than usual, the smell of coffee and cinnamon filling the air. The manager, a kind older woman named Martha, looked up as Daniel walked in, still in yesterday's clothes. I need to find Claire Evans, he said. She saved my daughter's life. Martha's smile faded. She called in sick this morning, she said. First time in 2 years. Said she needed a few days. Daniel frowned. Can you give me her number? Please, it's important. Martha hesitated, then finally scribbled something on a napkin. She's been through a lot, she said softly. Be gentle with her. He nodded, taking the napkin like it was something sacred. Back in his car, he called once, twice, 5 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. On the 6th attempt, he finally left a message. His voice was rough, unsteady. Claire, this is Daniel Hayes. You saved my daughter yesterday. I don't even know how to thank you. I need to know you're okay. Please call me back. Across town, Claire sat in her small apartment, the phone lighting up beside her but unanswered. The message played through the silence, his voice breaking near the end. She listened twice before hitting stop. Her eyes flicked to the closet, where an old paramedic uniform still hung neatly pressed, untouched for 2 years. Next to it was a faded photograph, her old team smiling proudly in front of an ambulance. And pinned beside it, yellowed by time, was a newspaper clipping. Child dies in highway crash despite rescue efforts. Claire's stomach clenched. The words had never stopped haunting her. She was the lead paramedic that night, the one who froze for 30 seconds too long. 30 seconds that stole a child's life. She could still hear the mother's scream, still see the blood on her hands. You said he'd be okay, the woman had sobbed. You promised he'd be okay. Claire pressed her palms to her face, her breath trembling. I don't deserve to save anyone, she whispered. But then she thought of Lily, the little girl's faint voice, her small hand clutching her sleeve, the life flickering back into her eyes. For the first time in years, Claire had acted, not frozen, and it had worked. Something deep inside her stirred. Fear, hope, both at once. Maybe saving Lily wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a sign. As Daniel replayed his unanswered voicemail and Claire stared at the uniform she swore she'd never wear again, both were haunted by the same question. Was what happened at that cafe a one-time miracle? Or the beginning of something neither of them were ready to face? 3 days passed before Claire Evans found the strength to go back to work. She'd spent those nights awake, haunted by 2 sets of memories, the little boy she couldn't save and the little girl she did. Sleep never came easily to her anymore. By the time she stepped into Harborview Café again, the morning light filtered softly through the windows, painting the tables in gold. She told herself it was just another shift. Coffee, orders, polite smiles, nothing more. But the moment she saw him sitting in the far corner, she froze. Daniel Hayes. He was waiting at their usual table, the same one where everything had happened. When their eyes met, she felt her pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought about turning around, pretending not to see him, but it was too late. He stood up, his expression determined but kind. Please, he said quietly, his voice steady but lined with emotion. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Claire hesitated, glancing at her manager, Martha, who nodded from behind the counter. Take your break, hon. Go on, she murmured. Reluctantly, Claire walked over and sat down across from Daniel. She kept her gaze fixed on the table, tracing the wood grain with her finger rather than meeting his eyes. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped. I came here to say thank you, he began softly. You saved my daughter's life when I couldn't even help her myself. I froze. You didn't. Claire shook her head, her throat tight. I just did what anyone trained would have done. It's not a big deal, Daniel frowned gently. Don't do that. Don't downplay it. You were calm when I wasn't. You told me what to do. You brought her back. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. You don't understand. Then make me understand, he said. You told me you were a paramedic. Why did you stop? For a long moment she didn't speak. Then with a voice barely above a whisper she said, Because I killed a kid. Daniel blinked. What? She lifted her eyes, raw and honest. 2 years ago. Highway crash. A 7-year-old boy trapped in the back seat. I was the lead paramedic on scene. I froze for 30 seconds, and by the time I moved, it was too late. He was gone. His mother. Her voice cracked. She screamed that I'd promised he'd be okay. And she was right. I did promise. And I failed. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't bother hiding them. After that, I couldn't do it anymore. I turned in my license and walked away. Because how do you go back to saving people when you couldn't save him? Silence hung between them. The hum of the espresso machine was the only sound in the room. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low and rough. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. Diabetic ketoacidosis. She called me 3 times that day, said she felt dizzy. I was in a board meeting that I thought couldn't wait. I sent her to voicemail every time. By the time I reached the hospital, she was already gone. Claire's breath caught. He looked her in the eyes, and for a moment it felt like he was seeing straight through her pain to his own. So I know, he said. I know what guilt feels like. I know what it's like to replay a single moment and wish you'd done it differently. Their eyes locked across the table. 2 people carrying the same invisible weight. Before she could reply, the cafe door swung open, and a flash of blonde curls rushed inside. Daddy! It was Lily, wearing a purple dress and her insulin pump proudly clipped to a glittery belt. She spotted Claire and lit up like the morning sun. You're the hero, lady, she said, running up and throwing her arms around Claire's neck. Claire froze for a heartbeat, then hugged her back, the warmth of that tiny embrace breaking something open inside her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tears she hadn't shed in 2 years. Lily pulled back, grinning. My birthday party's on Saturday. Daddy said I can invite whoever I want, and I want you to come. Claire blinked, startled. Me? Daniel smiled faintly. It's at the Children's Hospital Charity Wing. There's someone there I'd like you to meet. Dr. Chen. She runs the paramedic recertification program. Claire started to shake her head. No, that's not... Daniel reached into his jacket and slid a folded paper across the table. I looked into what happened, he said quietly. That highway accident. The coroner's report said the boy died on impact. No one could have saved him. You didn't fail him, Claire. She stared at him, her breath catching. You're sure? I'm sure, Daniel said, his voice gentle. You've been punishing yourself for something that was never your fault. As Claire sat there, trembling between disbelief and relief, Lily tugged at her sleeve. You'll come to my party, right? She asked. And for the first time in years, Claire felt the fragile flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Saturday came faster than Claire expected. She'd almost talked herself out of going 12 times. She didn't own anything fancy, and the thought of facing a room full of doctors and donors made her stomach twist. But Lily's voice, bright and hopeful, kept echoing in her mind. Please come. You're my hero. So, at 3:30, Claire Evans stood outside the Children's Hospital ballroom, wearing a simple navy blue dress borrowed from a co-worker. Through the glass doors, she could see purple ribbons and balloons everywhere. Laughter filled the air, and the banner above the entrance read, Happy 9th birthday, Lily. For a moment, Claire's nerves nearly won. She started to turn away, but the doors burst open and a small blur of motion slammed into her. You came! Lily squealed, hugging her tightly. The little girl's blonde curls brushed against Claire's cheek, her insulin pump gleaming with sparkly stickers. Come on, come inside. Before Claire could protest, Lily grabbed her hand and pulled her into the room. The ballroom buzzed with warmth, families, doctors, nurses, and even kids in wheelchairs laughing together. In one corner, Daniel was talking to a hospital administrator, but when he spotted Claire, his whole expression softened. You made it, he said, smiling. I wasn't sure you would. Claire glanced down, shyly smoothing her dress. Neither was I. Lily tugged her hand again. Daddy said there's someone you need to meet. Claire blinked. Oh? Before she could ask, Daniel guided her toward a poised woman in her 50s wearing a hospital badge that read, Dr. Patricia Chen, Medical Director. Her expression was calm but kind, the kind of authority that didn't need to raise its voice. Miss Evans, Dr. Chen said warmly, shaking her hand. I've heard quite a lot about you, Claire blushed. I'm sure most of it's been exaggerated. Actually, Dr. Chen said, not nearly enough. Mr. Hayes told us what happened at the cafe. You used a sublingual glucose technique that very few paramedics are confident enough to attempt. Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. It just came back to me. I didn't think. I just did it. That instinct, Dr. Chen said, is what keeps people alive. We reviewed your file, Claire. You left the service voluntarily. There was never a disciplinary record. Your license expired, that's all, which means it can be renewed. Claire's pulse quickened. Wait, what? Daniel stepped closer, smiling gently. Dr. Chen runs the paramedic recertification program. She's offering you a full scholarship. Dr. Chen nodded. If you complete it, there's a position waiting for you on our pediatric emergency response team. The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Claire stood frozen, heart pounding. I don't know if I can say yes, Lily interrupted softly, slipping her small hand into Claire's. Then you can save more kids like me. Something inside Claire cracked open, something she had kept buried under guilt and fear for 2 long years. Her throat tightened, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was being given a second chance. She looked at Dr. Chen, then at Daniel, then down at Lily's bright eyes. Yes, she said, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger. Yes, I'll do it. The applause that followed was spontaneous, spreading through the room like a wave. Claire felt her cheeks flush as people clapped, some even wiping tears. Lily threw her arms around her waist and Daniel mouthed thank you from across the room. For the first time in years, Claire didn't feel like the woman who failed. She felt like the woman who came back. Later, as the party wound down and music filled the background, Daniel approached her by the window. The evening light poured through the glass, casting gold across the room. You know, he said softly, when I saw you in that cafe, I thought you were just another stranger. Turns out you were exactly the person we needed most. Claire smiled faintly, looking down at Lily dancing with a group of kids. Maybe that's how miracles work, she said quietly. They show up wearing aprons instead of capes. As Claire watched Lily laughing under the shimmer of birthday lights, she didn't know this was only the beginning. 6 months later, one phone call would test everything she thought she'd regained and force her to prove, once and for all, that she truly belonged back in the field. 6 months later, the sun had barely risen when Claire Evans fastened the last strap of her paramedic uniform. The navy fabric felt both strange and familiar, like slipping into a life she'd once lived in another world. The old embroidered patch on her shoulder, Metro Emergency Response Unit, gleamed in the morning light. Her reflection stared back from the mirror. The woman looking at her wasn't the same one who had once walked away. There were faint lines around her eyes now, and a quiet steadiness in her expression. She'd earned those scars. They weren't shame anymore. They were proof she had survived. Claire grabbed her medical bag and headed out into the crisp air. The sound of sirens in the distance didn't make her flinch this time. It made her feel alive. Training had come back faster than she expected. The hands-on drills, the calls, the protocols. It was muscle memory, buried but not gone. Dr. Chen had been right. The instinct was still there. It had just been waiting for her to believe in it again. Her partner, Luis Romero, greeted her outside the ambulance bay with a grin. First official shift back, he said. Nervous? Claire gave a small laugh. Terrified. But in a good way. You'll be fine, Luis said, tossing her a pack of gloves. You've got the calm hands. Everyone's been talking about you, you know. The cafe story, Claire winced playfully. Great. That's exactly how I wanted to start my comeback. Legend status and all. Before she could say more, the dispatch radio crackled. Unit 4-3. Respond to possible anaphylactic reaction. Child age 7 at Riverside Playground. Louise shot her a glance. You good? Claire nodded slowly. Let's move, the drive blurred by. Her pulse raced, but her mind was sharp. As they pulled up to the playground, she spotted a crowd gathered near the swings. A woman knelt on the ground beside a small boy, his face flushed and swollen, gasping for air. Claire jumped out before the ambulance fully stopped. I'm Claire, paramedic, she said, kneeling beside the boy. What happened? The mother was crying. He ate a cookie at the birthday table. Peanuts, I didn't know. Okay, Claire said gently, already assessing the boy's airway. He's having an allergic reaction. We'll take care of him. Her hands were steady as she reached for the EpiPen. Luis, get me oxygen ready. She found the right spot on the boy's thigh, pressed the injector, and counted out loud. 1, 2, 3. The boy jerked slightly, his breath still wheezing but slower now. Good job, buddy. You're doing great. She kept her tone calm, rhythmic, the same way she'd spoken to Lily that day in the cafe. Moments later, his color began to return. His breaths came easier. His mother sobbed in relief, clutching his small hand. Thank you, oh God, thank you. Claire smiled softly, her heart pounding. You did the right thing calling for help. He's going to be okay. They loaded him into the ambulance for observation. And as they drove toward the hospital, Claire caught her reflection in the window. Helmet, best medical gear strapped across her chest. For the first time since that highway night 2 years ago, she didn't see failure. She saw purpose. When they arrived, Dr. Chen was waiting outside the ER entrance, arms crossed but smiling. First call back? She asked. Claire nodded, still catching her breath. A 7-year-old. Peanut allergy. We stabilized him. Good, Dr. Chen said, eyes twinkling. That's one more life you've touched. I hope you're starting to see what the rest of us already knew. You were never meant to leave this field. That evening, after her shift, Claire stopped by Harborview Café again. Her boots felt heavier than her first day, but her steps were lighter. Inside, the familiar smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon greeted her like home. At their usual table by the window sat Daniel and Lily, just like before. Lily looked up from her sketchbook, her face lighting up. Miss Claire, you look like a real superhero now. Claire laughed, sliding into the seat beside her. Maybe I am, Lily grinned. I drew you one. She held up a crayon drawing. 3 people standing hand in hand beneath a golden sun. Across the top, in uneven purple letters, were the words, My family saved me and I saved them back. Claire's eyes filled. And when she glanced at Daniel, he was smiling that quiet, grateful smile she'd come to know. As sunlight poured through the cafe window, Claire realized something profound. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. But fate wasn't done with her yet, and her next call would challenge everything she'd learned about forgiveness, courage, and love. It was late afternoon when the emergency call came through. Claire Evans was restocking supplies at the station when the dispatcher's voice crackled over the intercom. Unit 4-3, multi-vehicle collision, Highway 72 near the overpass, multiple injuries. Possible child trapped, proceed immediately. Her heart froze. Highway 72, the same road. The same stretch of asphalt where her life had shattered 2 years ago. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The radio hissed again, louder this time. Unit 4-3, do you copy? Claire swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. Copy that, on our way. Luis glanced at her as they jumped into the ambulance. You okay? She gave a small nod, though her stomach twisted. Yeah. Just know that place. The sirens wailed as they raced down the road. The world outside blurred. Trees, guardrails, traffic lights, all streaking past. But inside Claire's chest, the memory played clearly. The overturned car, the crying mother, the little boy's shoe lying in the rain. The guilt that had followed her every waking day since. When they arrived, chaos met them head-on. Flashing red and blue lights, the acrid smell of smoke, and twisted metal strewn across the asphalt. Claire jumped out and scanned the scene. One car was crushed against the guardrail, its windshield shattered. A small voice cried faintly from inside. Luis, over here, she shouted, sprinting toward the wreckage. The mother stood outside, blood streaking her forehead, screaming for her son. Claire's chest tightened, but she didn't freeze this time. She dropped to her knees beside the mangled door, peering through the cracked glass. A young boy, maybe 6, was wedged between the seat and dashboard, crying weakly. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, forcing calm into her tone. "My name's Claire. I'm gonna get you out, okay?" He nodded, eyes wide with fear. "It hurts," he whimpered. "I know," she said gently. "But you're so brave. Just stay still for me," she signaled to Luis. "We need the hydraulic spreader. Now!" As the equipment powered up, Claire talked the boy through every step, her voice steady and low. "I know this looks scary, but you're safe now. We've got you." The door finally gave way with a metallic crack. Claire slid in beside him, checking his pulse and airway. Minor bleeding, shock, but breathing strong. Relief swept through her. "We're good," she called out. "Let's move him." As they lifted him onto the stretcher, his tiny hand reached out and grabbed hers. "Don't go," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "You're safe now." Minutes later, they loaded him into the ambulance. Claire stayed beside him, her gloved hand resting lightly on his arm, as the city sped by outside. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but when they reached the ER, his vitals were stable. The doctors took over and Claire stepped back, covered in sweat and dust but smiling through tears. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, having already been notified. "I heard it was you on scene," she said, her voice soft but proud. "You did well." Claire's voice shook slightly. "It was the same stretch of road," she said quietly. "The same one from before." Dr. Chen's eyes softened. "And this time you saved him." Claire exhaled, trembling as relief washed through her. The weight she'd carried for years seemed to melt off her shoulders, leaving her lighter, freer than she'd ever felt. Later that evening, she stood outside the hospital under a sky streaked with orange and pink. A car pulled up, and Daniel, Hayes, stepped out with Lily, now stronger, healthier, smiling wide when she saw Claire. "Daddy said you were in another rescue today," Lily exclaimed, hugging her. "You really are a hero." Claire laughed softly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Not a hero, kiddo. Just someone who finally stopped running." Daniel smiled, his gaze warm and steady. "You've come a long way, Claire." "So have you," she said. "You stopped hiding behind your work." They stood there for a moment, the golden light wrapping around them like something sacred. Then Lily slipped her hand into Claire's, the way children do when they trust completely. "Can we go get hot chocolate again?" she asked. "Extra whipped cream?" Claire grinned. "You read my mind." And just like that, they found themselves back at Harborview Café, their table by the window waiting as though it had been holding its breath for them to return. The river outside shimmered in the fading light. Lily began coloring in a fresh sketchbook while Daniel ordered their usual drinks. Claire looked around the café, the hum of conversation, the smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee, the warmth of belonging, and felt something click into place. She was home, not just in a building, but in herself. As the last rays of sunlight spilled through the café window, Claire realized that life had given her not just a second chance, but a family she never saw coming. Because sometimes the people we rescue are the ones who remind us that redemption isn't about forgetting the past, it's about having the courage to live again. 1 year later, a soft spring breeze drifted through the open windows of Harborview Café, carrying the faint scent of coffee and fresh rain. The place looked a little different now, new paint on the walls, brighter lights, a few framed photographs on the far side. One of them, hung near the counter, showed a moment frozen in time. A smiling little girl hugging a woman in a paramedic uniform, both laughing as if the world had just been made new. It had been 1 year since that photograph was taken. 1 year since the day Claire Evans stopped running from the past and stepped back into the life she was meant to live. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Claire walked in, her uniform crisp, her dark hair pulled neatly back. She carried her jacket folded over one arm, a few paramedic patches sewn freshly onto the sleeve. The whole place went quiet for a moment, not out of surprise anymore, but respect. She smiled at Martha, the manager, who poured her a cup without asking. "Morning, hero," Martha teased softly. Claire chuckled. "Still just coffee, Martha. No capes today." She moved toward the corner table by the big window, the same one where everything had begun. Sitting there, as always, were Daniel Hayes and Lily, waiting with their usual drinks. Lily, now 9, had grown taller and stronger. Her curls were longer, her cheeks brighter, and her tiny insulin pump, once a constant reminder of fragility, was now decorated with stickers that read, "Brave like Mom and fearless like Claire." When Lily saw her, she jumped up and ran into her arms. "You're late. I was saving someone's cat," Claire said, grinning as she hugged her tight. "Literally. Stuck in a fence. Dramatic, but he's fine." Daniel laughed. "You've been busier than the fire department these days." Claire sat down beside him, her coffee steaming in front of her. "Busy is good. It means I'm doing something that matters." Daniel nodded. "You always were." They sat for a moment, watching the sunlight shimmer across the river. Everything felt slower, softer. The rush that once defined Daniel's life, conference calls, deadlines, flights, had faded. After Lily's collapse a year ago, he'd cut his workload in half, moved his company's headquarters closer to home, and learned something he'd never understood before. Time was the one thing you couldn't buy back. Lily pulled out her sketchbook, flipping to a new page. "I'm drawing us again," she announced proudly. "But this time, it's different." Claire leaned over. "Oh yeah? What's different?" Lily smiled as she drew 3 stick figures standing together under a bright sun. But this time, there wasn't an angel floating above them. Instead, she drew wings on all 3 figures. "See," she said, "because now we all save people. Daddy helps with the hospital fundraiser, you save people for real, and I remind everyone to keep fighting." Claire's chest tightened. "That's perfect, sweetheart." Daniel smiled softly. "You know she's not wrong." Claire looked at him, the corner of her lips lifting. "And what about you, Mr. CEO? Still thinking about cutting another deal with fate?" He laughed under his breath. "I think I made my best deal already," he said, his gaze lingering on both of them. For a while, they sat quietly, sipping their drinks. The hum of the cafe, the laughter of strangers, the warmth of belonging, all of it felt like a gentle heartbeat that tied them together. Then Claire's phone buzzed on the table, a call from dispatch. Her eyes flicked toward Daniel, silently asking permission. He nodded. "Go. They need you." She smiled, standing and grabbing her jacket. "I'll be back before the hot chocolate gets cold." As she hurried toward the door, Lily called after her. "Hey, Miss Claire." Claire turned, pausing in the doorway. "Don't forget," Lily said with a mischievous grin. "Heroes always come back." Claire's laughter filled the cafe. "Always." She stepped outside into the sunlight, slipping on her jacket as sirens echoed faintly in the distance. This time, they didn't haunt her. They called to her. The fear that once held her hostage had turned into fuel. The ghosts she used to run from had become the reason she kept showing up. As the ambulance turned the corner, she climbed in beside her partner, ready for whatever came next. Back inside the cafe, Lily added one last detail to her drawing, a golden heart in the center of all 3 figures, and smiled. "There," she said, satisfied. "Now it's perfect." Daniel looked down at the picture and felt the same quiet truth Claire had come to understand. Sometimes, family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up when the world falls apart, and stays to help you build it again. And as the sirens faded into the distance, carrying Claire toward another life waiting to be saved, one thing was clear. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about finding the courage to keep showing up, one heartbeat at a time.